Well, Booktube, this is Johnny. I noticed that last time I didn't say my name, but this is Johnny from Booktube. I am from, this is West Michigan. We live about 5-10 minutes from Lake Michigan here in Holland. Today it is 85 degrees inside the house. We finally turned on the central air to cool off the house. It's supposed to get humid and hot this week. It is a Sunday night. It is June the 11th, 2017. It is 8:09 at night. I'm sitting here writing in my diary. I usually don't write at night. I usually just finish around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But I just felt like writing. So I'm on page 521. And tomorrow is a Monday. Tomorrow is June the 12th. We're coming to the middle of the month. This week is the big Friends of the Library used book sale, which I'm kind of excited about. I love going to used book sales. I like going to thrift stores looking for books. Like I said, I've always been, excuse me, I've always been into books. I helped set up Wednesday and Thursday, and Friday is the first day of the sale. So I wonder what we'll see what I will find this year. So what have I been reading? Well, as I mentioned in my last video, I'm still reading William Perkins. It's like sometimes I'll read a book. It's not always, Christian books, but sometimes I might get into a history book, or I might get into some biography, or I might get into some history or some Christian book. Like when I was really sick with that bad cold recently, I just read that book on ancient Christian history. I read that for a couple of weeks as I was sick. And what was that book titled? Did I write it down here? I don't know. I really haven't been reading it this month. I did read around June the 3rd, We Believe in the Holy Spirit, Volume 4, Ancient Christian Doctrine. I read that, and I was reading that book by John Barth. I was reading The Path of Christianity, the First 1,000 Years by John Anthony McCluckan. I was reading that on the 4th of June. And I was reading that book I got from Reader's World, Hell and Good Company, The Spanish Civil War and the World It Made by Richard Hughes. I was reading that on June the 4th. And then I was reading that book, Leave Me Alone, I'm Reading by Maureen Corrigan. Then on the 5th, I was reading that Reformation commentary on 1 Corinthians, Reformation commentary on Scripture. I was reading that on the 5th. And then I got on the 5th, I got in the afternoon, the works of William Perkins, 4 volumes, which I have been reading the last couple of days. I think I showed these volumes. I've been reading volume 4. In volume 4 is an exposition on the whole epistle of Jude, which I showed you is just one chapter just before you get to Revelations in the New Testament. So you have Revelations, let me see here. See, you have the revelation of St. John of the Divine, and then right here is the general epistle of Jude. And all that William Perkins has been expounding is the first, verse 3. Beloved, who, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. So that's what he's been expounding. He's been expounding what is that faith, what is that common salvation that the church for the last 2,000 years has confessed and contend for. So he's been doing that. So I've been reading that, and I think I showed you the other volumes are right here. So you see I have my work cut out. I mean, this is like, you talk about people on Booktube show chunkers. That is a chunker. So I've been reading those. Well, I've just been reading the one on volume 4. Volume 4, the exposition on Jude. Many years ago, when we were going to this church here, when we first came to Holland about 26 years ago, we, with 10 other families, started a small Dutch independent Calvinistic church, and I taught adult Sunday school for 10 years. I taught systematic theology, and I taught the Bible. And one of the things I taught was 1st, 2nd Peter, and Jude. So I've always been Jude is something I've always know a lot about. And well, I've been reading the Bible for 47 years. I went to Bible college, studied the Bible. I went to seminary. I've been studying and reading and about the Bible for 47 years. So anyway, the point is that's what I've been reading. I don't know when I'll get back into my other books that I mentioned about to be read throughout the month of June. I don't know when I'm going to get into those. So yeah, that's what I'm reading. I was mentioning in that last video about cultivating a literary taste. I didn't want to come off being kind of snobbish. I recognize that in the Booktube world, there are all kinds of readers. I mean, there are people who are into fantasy, there are people into science fiction, people who are into comic books, people who are into graphic novels, people who are into biographies and letters and memoirs. There are people who are into gay literature, young adult, YA literature. There's all kinds of people out there, and I recognize that. I'm just saying, and I know that people who are really into all that kind of literature, that they want to read what they consider to be the best. So yeah, I'm not just saying that I have some kind of corner on what is the only literary taste. I'm just saying, I was just sharing my thoughts, my own reflections. I wasn't really pointing a finger at anybody out there in Booktube world. So that's one thing. If you watch my videos over the last year, I tend to be very kind of self-conscious. I get kind of insecure. I kind of feel like I've got to defend myself, that I've said something wrong, that people are going to get mad at me, people are going to they'll just unsubscribe me, and I get kind of freaked because I want to be a blessing. I want to be a good guy. I want to be a good literary guide when it comes to literature. And one of the reasons why I started Booktube was to present what I think is good Christian literature, because I don't know anybody in Booktube world that talks about Christian books. I mean, how many people in Booktube world read the 17th, 16th century English Puritans, which is good literature. I mean, the Bible is good literature. I always read the King James, which was around the time of the English Puritans, the King James Version translation. So I'm not just here just to present about Christian books, but also I have been reading secular literature since I can remember, since I was in high school. And like I said, for many years, I didn't have time to read secular literature. I was working full-time, raising our children. I was involved in church and teaching, and I was involved in just, going to activities like our kids when they're growing up. And I didn't have time to read anything except the English Puritans and Reformed literature. Or I only had time to prepare for Sunday school classes because my job was all physical labor. I came home exhausted every day. I unloaded farm trucks at an egg processing plant. I would unload tons and tons of eggs every day, sometimes 45, 50, 60 hours a week. And I didn't like my job. It was very stressful. I hated it. It was just very difficult. And so when I got home every day, I was usually exhausted. And then I just could read a little bit of my Puritans or work on my Sunday school class, and that was about it. But then when I left my job, I was terminated back in June of 2007 on the 21st. You can read that account if you want to in my Crooked Fingers live journal diary, where I record. Well, I've been writing in Crooked Fingers since March of 2001, and I have almost 23,000 entries. And you can read all those entries if you want to, but you can read about the time on June the 21st, 2007, when I got terminated. And when I got terminated, it took me a couple of years to get back into my own natural rhythm. And then I started reading all over the map. I didn't have to prepare for Sunday school class. I didn't have to read just for my spiritual life. I could read for my intellectual life. So then I got back into reading the books that I read when I was a young man in high school, in the first years of college. And I have been reading over the years off and on, like I read, like I would read John Updike novel or a Saul Bellows novel or a John Irving's. I did read a lot of church history. I read a lot of Christian mysticism. I always have read Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg. I've always read those no matter where I was at in my life. But once again, when you're married and you got 3 kids and you're working and you're doing all these other things. I did an internship in Houston, Texas for a couple of years. I had to do house visitation. I had to go to Presbyterian meetings. I had to preach sermons. I had to teach Sunday school. I had to give mission conferences. I had to do all kinds of things. And plus, when you're raising your children, that's a 24-hour job, just raising your kids. So when my wife was working, she always worked second shift. I was the one that cooked dinners and washed clothes and put the kids to bed and read to them and took care of them, which I found was a very precious time in my life. I love our children. I'm very thankful that they're married to great women and men. I mean, my daughter is married to a great guy. We have 2 sons who are married to great women. We have wonderful grandchildren, so there's much to be thankful for. But I'm saying it's only been since about 2009 that I have been reading all over the map. And like I've said in my other videos, I basically read in the mornings, and sometimes, like I said, all I read is some Christian book. I got a book in the mail yesterday that's a Christian book. This is what's more of a doctorate dissertation that was published by Reformation Heritage Books, which are the people that have published William Perkins' works. they published this dissertation called The Spiritual Brotherhood, Cambridge Puritans and the Nature of Christian Piety by Paul R. Schaefer Jr. I've been reading that the last couple of, well, I got it yesterday. I've been reading it. There's a big chapter on William Perkins. So I've been reading that, and I've been reading William Perkins, the biography. I have gotten, I did show in the video books that I got at a used bookstore, a library used bookstore in Douglas. I showed you these books, Morgan, American Financier, biography by Gene Strouse. I showed you that one. And I showed you Final, the novel of the Reagan years by Thomas Mallon. I showed you that book in the last video. I showed you this novel by Mary Gordon, The Love of My Youth. And I showed you this Edgar Allan Poe and the Juke-Box, Uncollected Poems, Drafts, and Fragments of the poet Elizabeth Bishop. And I showed you this book, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, Civilizations of the Ancient Mediterranean by Charles Freeman. But I didn't show you these other thrift books I got. I got this book in the mail. I ordered it. I got it yesterday. This is by Nicola Barker, Darkmans, a novel. This was a shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. I got this in the mail the other day. It was recommended by I read about it in this book, Stephen Moore, My Back Pages, Reviews and Essays. I read about this book here in, right here, right here, Nicola Barker. He mentions the Darkmans, and it was published in 2007. So I picked that up. I volunteered at the library used bookstore on Saturday. I brought this book home, The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee. I brought home a novel by Edna O'Brien, The Little Red Chairs. I picked up at a thrift store Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, The Good Omens, The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agus Nutter Witch. And I picked up a novel by Paul Asher, The Brooklyn Follies, the novel. And I picked up a biography of the Impressionistic painter Mary Cassanet by Nancy Hale. I was really excited to find this. I don't have any biography on her. She's one of my favorite Impressionistic painters. And then I found this big volume of the early stories of John Updike. These stories are from the years 1953 to 1975. So these are I got John Updike. I love John Updike. He's one of my favorite writers. I love his short stories. I've been reading them since I was in high school, and that was almost 47 years ago. And I was reading Paul Asher's memoirs recently, which I really enjoyed. I'm still reading. I think I got it over there in my to be read pile. I never read Neil Gaiman. I have a couple of his books though in our library. I have almost all of Edna O'Brien's novels. I didn't have this one, The Little Red Chairs. It says here in the back about this novel, in the dead of winter, a stranger arrives in the Irish town of Coolule. A charismatic and worldly Dr. Valad is a self-proclaimed poet and healer, and a welcome disruption to the monotony of village life. Before long, Friedema McBrien falls under his spell, and defying the shackles of wedlock and convention, turns to him to cure her deepest pains. Then one morning the illusion is roughly scattered. Miss Dr. Valad is arrested and revealed to be a notorious war criminal and mass murderer. The community is devastated, and no one more than Felmima and disgraced and utterly alone, she embarks on a journey that will bring both profound hardship and ultimately the prospect of redemption. Moving from Ireland to London to Hague, The Little Red Chairs is a vivid exploration of humanity's capacity for evil as well as the bravest kind of love. So I got that. I never heard of this novel, The Queen of the Night, Alexander Chee, but it has back here a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, dazzling Wall Street Journal says, the Washington Post, a brilliant performance, Wired, masterful. It just looks interesting. And this thing really looks like a big chunker. It's kind of a postmodern. This Darkmans, Nicola Barker. So I got plenty to read. Oh, I got a book this morning. My wife and I, this is a Sunday morning, we went downtown to the Reader's World bookstore, which is our local independent bookstore. It's been there for 50 years. And my wife went down there to pick up some children's books that she ordered and some Sunday newspapers. And I picked up this novel that I've been looking at for a while. This is called The Luminaries by Eleanor Canton. So I've been looking at this. I read a couple pages tonight. I might get into it. I don't know. I'm kind of, like I said, I'm on this William Perkins kind of groove. I'm just kind of floating with William Perkins until I get burnt out. So I don't know. I felt a little burnout today reading William Perkins. It's kind of like you immerse yourself into something and then I have to think about it and meditate on it and digest it. Like I said, I read Puritan spirituality and theology for almost all my Christian life. But sometimes, I don't know, I get in the mood where I can read it, and then sometimes I can't. So when I can read it, I read it, and then maybe I get burnt out on it, and then I go on to something else. And maybe I'll go on to the Luminaries, or I'll get back into all those books that I mentioned in my previous videos. So that's what's going on in my book world. I suppose this is what, just telling you where I'm at right now, my reading. Hoping you're going to have a good week. Thank you for the new subscribers. Thank you for putting up with my crazy ideas, and tell me what you're reading. Thank you for any comments, any questions. Just feel free to tell me whatever. Until next time, bye.